They don't ever campaign for your votes. They don't ever speak in public. They move money between the shadows. And money is what moves governments. Trillions of dollars are controlled behind the scenes. Everything happens in total silence. The real power is never seen. The real power always stays hidden. It is all invisible by design. They don't ever chase the headlines. They stay far out of the spotlight. They own the people who lead the way, the ones who create the news itself. Deals are signed in private rooms. Silence is the most expensive of all. It is the only currency that truly matters, where records simply don't exist. The most expensive currency of all. Some couples build memories together, others build entire global systems. Systems that run the whole world, power that reaches into every corner. They were signed quietly and without a word, signed many decades ago in the dark. Land, art, and the media themselves, and the vital infrastructure of nations. Their entire portfolio is vast. It looks more like a whole country. Suitcases became simple wire transfers. The wire transfers were sent instantly. Names disappeared into the void, into the depths of shell companies. The entire structure is perfectly legal. Everything they do is legal. The secrecy was always intentional. It was built this way from the start. Every location is selected with care. Every location is chosen with precision. Secrecy always has a physical address, and it can be found if you know where to look. Control the busy ports of the world, and you will control the flow of trade. Control the ports to control the money, and you will eventually control the nation. Infrastructure is never just a charity. It is a form of long-term global control. A highway through the jungle today, strategic territory for them tomorrow. Art is not just for decoration. Art is never just for decoration. It is an untaxed and global currency. This is how they hide their currency. A luxury resort standing today. A luxury resort building today. Strategic territory for them tomorrow. Controlled by the ones in the shadows. Education shapes the future leaders. Leadership shaped by the money. Funding shapes the education itself. And the leaders will follow the money. Who controls the flow of data? Who controls the world's decisions? Controls the very fate of nations and the future of our civilizations. The votes look very public, but the funding remains hidden, kept far away from the light, where no one can ever see. Lawyers are the ones who build. They build the systems of control. Contracts are what protect them. They protect the global empire, the real deals of the world. These deals happen between sessions, in the rooms you can't enter, beyond the reach of the law. This is not just about money. This is about absolute power, the power of global control. Control over the entire world. They don't hold elections. They don't give speeches. They move money, and money moves governments. What you're about to see has never been assembled in one place. This is the quiet empire no map will ever show you. Sovereign wealth funds now control over $11 trillion in global assets. But the couples behind these funds, they remain invisible. Not by accident, by design. Their influence reaches every continent. Their names appear on nothing. A sovereign wealth couple is not a headline. They are the people who own the people who make the headlines. 2 names, 1 strategy, unlimited reach. And you have never been meant to find them. Jurisdictions that don't report, banks that don't ask, agreements signed in rooms that don't officially exist. The modern influence machine runs on silence. And silence, it turns out, is very expensive. Some couples build families, some build legacies. These couples build systems, financial, political, jurisdictional. Systems that outlast any election, any regime, any scandal. The empire you never knew existed is already running your world. Sovereign wealth couples first emerged in the Gulf states of the 1970s. Petrodollar surpluses needed homes, and then the world was for sale. 2 names on 1 trust, 2 signatures on 1 empire. What began as conservation became conquest. Real estate, farmland, infrastructure, media. The portfolio of a sovereign wealth couple reads like a country's balance sheet, because it is a country's balance sheet. Just held by 2 people in a name no one recognizes. The tools of sovereign influence have evolved. Wire transfers replaced suitcases, foundations replaced banks, shell companies replaced names, trusts replaced accountability. The system is airtight. It was designed to be. Legal structures exist specifically to prevent disclosure. The jurisdiction is chosen before the investment is made. The names are the last thing anyone will ever find. This is not an accident. This is the strategy. Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Cayman, Mauritius, each jurisdiction a node in a larger invisible network. Each node selected for its silence, its secrecy, its price. The map of influence follows the map of amnesia. Ports, pipelines, corridors, concessions. Infrastructure is the quietest form of geopolitical control. When you own the road, you decide who travels it. When you own the port, you decide what enters the country. The Belt and Road Initiative is just the visible version. Sovereign wealth couples were doing this decades before. No cameras, no ribbons, no ceremony. Just deeds, titles, control. Art is not vanity, art is currency. One Monet bought quietly in Geneva is worth more than 10 press conferences. It is stored untaxed, moved unreported, valued as needed. Culture becomes capital when no one is watching. Tourism economies are favorite targets. Their governments need investment. Their oversight is minimal. A resort today, a runway tomorrow. A military base, never officially. The transformation happens over years, not headlines. Every government has a price. Most don't know they've paid it. The minister who approves the zoning, the official who signs the license. No payment changes hands in the room. It already changed hands 3 jurisdictions ago. Education is the softest form of influence and the most durable. Fund a school, name a chair, shape the curriculum. The students who graduate become the ministers of tomorrow. The investment pays dividends for generations. The think tank writes the policy. The media explains it. The politician delivers it. 3 steps, 3 institutions, 1 funder. The narrative is managed before it is manufactured. This is not conspiracy. This is infrastructure. Digital infrastructure is the new port, the new pipeline, the new road. Whoever owns the cables owns the conversation. Whoever controls the data controls the decision. Sovereign wealth couples learned this before governments did. Technology acquisition is influence acquisition. Buy the startup before it becomes the platform. Own the algorithm before it runs the election. The investment thesis is geopolitical, not financial. Real estate is the oldest safe haven for sovereign capital. London, New York, Sydney, Singapore, entire neighborhoods owned by entities no journalist can trace. The city you live in may belong to someone you will never meet. A second passport is not just travel convenience. It is a second legal identity, a second jurisdiction. Sovereign wealth couples often hold 6 or 7, each one a door to a different legal universe. Gold, diamonds, wine, art, antiquities. The Freeport model holds over 100 billion in stored wealth globally. No import, no export, no tax, no name. The Freeport model holds over 100 billion in stored wealth globally. The United Nations votes on what sovereign wealth couples have already decided. The resolution is theater. The negotiation happened in Davos. The resolution is theater. The negotiation happened in Davos. The stage is public. The script is private. Davos is not a conference. It is a clearinghouse. Where interests are aligned before laws are written, the sessions are the cover story. The real forum happens between sessions behind closed doors. The yacht is not a toy. It is a sovereign territory. No address, no fixed jurisdiction, no oversight. The deal that cannot be made on land gets made at sea. International waters have no laws because they were designed that way. Energy was always the foundation of sovereign power. Oil fields bought through trusts, gas rights hidden in subsidiaries. The resource belongs to a country, the profit belongs to a couple. This is not theft, it is structured ownership, entirely legal. The 21st century's oil is lithium, cobalt, rare earths. Whoever owns the mines owns the future of technology. Sovereign wealth couples began acquiring these rights in the 1990s. The electric vehicle boom was already spoken for before it began. Food security is the next sovereignty battleground. Millions of acres of African and Asian farmland are now foreign-owned. The food grown here will not feed the people who live here. Hunger is leverage. Harvest is geopolitics. Pharmaceutical rights are sovereign weapons. A drug patent held in the right jurisdiction cannot be compelled. During a pandemic, that is not a legal technicality. That is life and death in the hands of a trust no one has heard of. Political financing is the final frontier of sovereign influence. Super PACs, nonprofits, dark money vehicles. The contribution circles the globe twice before it appears in a disclosure. By then, the candidate has already been chosen. The lawyers are the architects. Every structure that protects sovereign wealth was designed by a team of attorneys. Their work is legal, their secrecy is contractual, and their loyalty is to the retainer, not the republic. Small nations have been transformed into legal machinery. The entire economy is the offshore financial sector. A government of 50 staff administers 50,000 shell companies. The island nation exists to serve the empire that owns it. The journalists who find these trails are few. The obstacles are enormous. Documents are redacted, sources go silent, lawsuits arrive before stories publish. Slap suits, strategic litigation, are sovereign weapons used against journalists. The empire defends itself with its own attorneys before any government can react. Sovereign wealth funds can move markets. When the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority buys, entire sectors lift. When a Norwegian fund divests, companies restructure overnight. The market does not set the price. The sovereign couple approves it. By the time Part 1 ends, we have only named the surface. $11 trillion, dozens of jurisdictions, 2 names on one structure. The influence runs deeper than capital. It runs through institutions. And the next layer is where the real story begins. You cannot see sovereign influence, only its effects. A law gets amended, a license gets approved, a contract gets awarded. Somewhere, in a jurisdiction that doesn't answer questions, the transaction settled. This is how architecture of shadow functions, cause without visible cause. A typical sovereign wealth couple structure has 7 to 12 legal entities, each one in a different jurisdiction, each one legitimate, each one opaque. The total picture exists only in the attorney's mind, and the couple's safe. One building on Ugland House Road once listed 18,000 companies. Not offices, not employees, addresses, legal fictions with real power, phantom entities with real assets. The building is the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction is the secret. Luxembourg became the fund vehicle capital of Europe by design. Tax rulings, treaty networks, regulatory sophistication. A sovereign wealth couple with a Luxembourg vehicle is inside the EU, with none of the disclosure requirements that EU citizenship demands. Singapore rewrote its fund laws to attract exactly this kind of capital. The Variable Capital Company, launched 2020, and became the structure of choice. In 3 years, 10,000 VCCs were registered. The government understood, attract the structures, and the capital follows. The Abu Dhabi Investment Authority manages over $700 billion. It is the largest sovereign wealth fund couple vehicle in the Gulf. Its ownership structure connects to the ruling family through a chain of intermediaries. Legal, legitimate, and entirely impenetrable to outside scrutiny. Norway is the model of transparency. Its fund publishes every position, but Norway is the exception that proves the rule. Every other major sovereign fund operates with far less disclosure. Transparency is optional. Most choose otherwise. Qatar spent $220 billion on the World Cup, not to watch football, to host a statement of global legitimacy. The QIA owns stakes in Volkswagen, Barclays, and the Canary Wharf Group. Soft power costs, but it returns an access no treaty can buy. The Saudi PIF controls over $700 billion in assets. It is the personal vehicle of the Crown Prince, not the state in any traditional sense. This is the sovereign wealth couple model made explicit. One person, sovereign authority, unlimited capital deployment. China Investment Corporation manages over $1.2 trillion. But CIC is one vehicle. There are dozens of state-adjacent funds operating in parallel. Their mandates blend financial return, strategic acquisition, diplomatic leverage. In Beijing, the line between sovereign fund and sovereign state is intentionally blurred. The Panama Papers exposed 11.5 million documents from one firm, but Mossack Fonseca was one firm among thousands. Its clients included heads of state, sovereign funds, and wealth couples from 200 countries, and the investigation barely scratched the surface of what it found. The British Virgin Islands registers more international business companies than any territory on Earth. More than 500,000 active companies. Population, 31,000. Every company conceals an owner. Most owners are never found. Britain administers this system. Britain profits from this system. The Channel Islands are the quiet side door into British financial law. Trusts formed here carry English common law protection. Assets can be held for generations without tax, without disclosure. The Sovereign Wealth Couples Trust was likely formed in Jersey before they turned 40. Mauritius sits between Africa and Asia and serves both as a conduit jurisdiction. Tax treaties with India and a dozen African nations make it invaluable. A sovereign wealth vehicle in Mauritius can invest in Indian infrastructure, pay zero tax, disclose nothing, and operate perfectly legally. Ireland became the European Union's shadow finance capital. 12.5% corporate tax, deep treaty network, English common law, sovereign wealth vehicles routing through Dublin access European markets, with minimal friction and maximal opacity. Liechtenstein is not a financial center, it is a legal sanctuary. The Anstalt structure, unique in the world, offers near-total anonymity. Assets are held for the benefit of no named person. They are held for the purpose, and the purpose is never publicly defined. Monaco has no income tax, no capital gains tax, no inheritance tax. It is smaller than Central Park. It has the highest density of millionaires on Earth. For a sovereign wealth couple, Monaco residency is a tax designation, not a lifestyle choice. The villa in Monaco is the cheapest asset in the portfolio. Dubai's DIFC operates under English common law inside the UAE. a financial jurisdiction within a federal system. Sovereign wealth couples use DIFC entities as Gulf access vehicles. Tax-free, legally robust, geographically central, strategically brilliant. Small island nations grant full island leases, 99 years, to a company with an address in a jurisdiction that doesn't share information. The island is leased, the infrastructure is controlled, the access is managed. This is how you own a piece of a sovereign nation without declaring it. Infrastructure diplomacy does not require a flag to fly. The port is built. The concession runs 50 years. The operating company is registered in Singapore or Dubai. The beneficial owners remain unknown. The leverage is permanent. The post-Soviet sovereign wealth model is the most opaque of all. No independent judiciary, no free press, no beneficial ownership registry. The fund is the ruler is the fund. In these jurisdictions, sovereign couple and sovereign state are the same entity. Foreign sovereign influence operates legally inside American democracy. FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, requires disclosure. But the sovereign wealth couple is not the registered agent. Their lobbyist is, their law firm is, their public relations firm is. Brookings, Atlantic Council, Middle East Institute, all received substantial funding from Gulf sovereign entities. None are agents of foreign governments. All are independent institutions. The influence flows through ideas, not instructions. It is entirely deniable. Harvard, MIT, Oxford, LSE all have chairs, institutes, buildings funded by sovereign wealth. The academic research produced at these institutions shapes global policy debates. The sovereign couple does not write the research. They simply fund the environment in which it is written. Media ownership traces are among the hardest to follow. A fund in Luxembourg owns a holding company in Delaware. That Delaware company owns a content studio in Los Angeles, whose editorial independence is entirely intact and entirely theoretical. Content is the new currency of influence. Who funds the documentary decides which truth gets told, which history gets produced, which narrative gets distributed. The sovereign wealth couple doesn't censor, they simply commission. Sport is the most potent soft power tool ever invented. Manchester City, PSG, Newcastle, all sovereign wealth acquisitions. The stadium becomes an embassy, the club becomes a flag. Billions of fans become inadvertent ambassadors for the sovereign couple's nation. Luxury hospitality brands are prestige assets with operational intelligence. Every guest leaves a data trail. Every meeting room carries a record. The hotel is an asset class, it is also a listening environment. Luxury brands are influence assets disguised as consumer goods. LVMH, Richemont, Kering, all have sovereign wealth in their cap table. When someone wears the brand, they participate in the narrative. Aspiration is a form of geopolitical projection. Defense acquisition is where sovereign wealth and sovereign power converge. A weapons purchase financed by a sovereign fund is a strategic commitment. The contractor gains revenue, the seller gains influence. The sovereign couple gains the government's trust and its secrets. Shipping is the invisible backbone of sovereign wealth deployment. Flags of convenience, beneficial ownership shields, multiple registration layers. 90% of global trade moves by sea. Its ownership is almost entirely anonymous. The goods you consume may be funded by a capital you will never trace. The Bretton Woods institutions were designed to prevent private sovereign power. Instead, they became co-investors with it. When the IMF and a sovereign fund co-finance infrastructure, who sets the terms? The answer depends entirely on who has more capital on the table. Humanitarian investment is the most effective form of sovereign influence. Feed a population through your foundation. Rebuild their infrastructure through your fund. You don't occupy their country. You don't have to. You own their gratitude. The Panama Papers, the Pandora Papers, the FinCEN files, each investigation tore back a layer of the architecture. Each one found the same names in different configurations. And each one only revealed what could be proven. The rest remains hidden. The architecture of shadow has a structure. Every structure has a logic. Every node in the network can theoretically be traced. The question is, who has the authority, the access, and the will to do it? That question is Part 3's territory, and the answer is not reassuring. Sovereign influence doesn't stay hidden forever. It fractures under pressure, under investigation, under exposure, and when it fractures, governments fall, markets seize, and secrets surface. This is the moment the sovereign couple fears most, and prepares for constantly. When regulators move, they move slowly, and with massive force. The subpoena covers a decade of records. The nominee directors cooperate, the attorneys claim privilege, and the beneficial owners are conveniently in a jurisdiction that doesn't extradite. Switzerland's banking secrecy law was dismantled piece by piece after 2008. FATCA, CRS, the Global Forum on Transparency, each treaty cracked open a vault that had been sealed for decades. The sovereign wealth couple had already moved their assets. 3 years earlier, international pressure led to the Common Reporting Standard, CRS. 130 jurisdictions agreed to automatically share financial information. Within 3 months of the announcement, capital began moving, not out of the system, into the remaining non-CRS jurisdictions. The Corporate Transparency Act passed in the United States in 2021. For the first time, beneficial owners of U.S. entities must be registered. The sovereign wealth industry immediately set up structures to comply technically and disclose minimally. The loopholes were written before the ink dried. Litigation against sovereign wealth structures is extraordinarily complex. Jurisdiction must first be established, and the structures are designed to prevent it. A London court ruling cannot pierce a Liechtenstein Anstalt. The architecture doesn't just protect assets, it defeats legal challenges. Political instability is the sovereign wealth couple's primary risk. When the regime changes, the assets must have already moved. This is why diversification across jurisdictions is not financial strategy. It is survival strategy. The Ben Alis, the Mubaraks, the Marcos family, all had structures. None moved fast enough. February 2022, Western governments froze $300 billion in Russian sovereign assets. In days, not months, superyacht-sized properties frozen, accounts locked. The speed revealed how much the West had always known and always chosen not to act on. The Roman Abramovichs of the world moved their yachts to non-cooperating jurisdictions. Turkey, UAE, Maldives, beyond the reach of European asset freezes. Those who didn't move fast enough lost hundreds of millions. The rest learned the most important lesson of sovereign wealth: geography is destiny. In 2022, the UAE was placed on the FATF gray list, a recognition that its financial compliance framework had been weaponized by sanctioned actors. The sovereign wealth economy depends on reputation as much as secrecy. A gray list changes the calculus for every legitimate investor. Sovereign wealth investment in fragile states often disguises predatory lending. The loan terms favor the lender, the infrastructure serves the lender's strategic interests. When the loan defaults, the asset transfers. Hambantota Port, this is no longer a theory, it already happened. Hambantota Port in Sri Lanka was built with Chinese sovereign loans. When Sri Lanka couldn't repay, the port was leased to China for 99 years. This is debt trap diplomacy. It is sovereign wealth deployment as geopolitical acquisition. No flag was planted, no soldier arrived, the paperwork was sufficient. Africa is the primary theater of 21st century sovereign wealth competition. Chinese, Gulf, Western, all deploying capital simultaneously. Each with different terms, different expectations, different definitions of ownership. The continent is the prize. Its citizens are the last to know. Journalists who expose sovereign wealth structures face targeted suppression. SLAP lawsuits, strategic legal actions against public participation. Designed not to win, but to exhaust, to drain resources, to silence. The legal cost of being right is often higher than the cost of being wrong. The island small, the financial sector proportionally enormous. A car bomb, October 2017, outside her home in Malta. She had traced the money, she had named the names. She was right, and the people she named had the resources to respond. Jamal Khashoggi was a journalist covering Saudi sovereign power. He was murdered inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in October 2018. The CIA concluded the Crown Prince approved the operation. The PIF, the Saudi Sovereign Fund, continued its global investment program without pause. Sovereign wealth influence in democratic elections is the newest frontier. Rupert Murdoch's papers, RT, Russia Today, various Gulf-funded think tanks. The line between investment and interference is drawn differently by every jurisdiction, and it is always drawn after the election has already been decided. Digital disinformation is the newest tool of sovereign influence. State-adjacent media operations produce content indistinguishable from journalism. The algorithm distributes it, the audience consumes it. The sovereign couple doesn't run the operation, they fund the infrastructure that does. This is what sovereign influence looks like in its final form. Not a coup, not an occupation, a vote. A government elected by its people that governs for someone else's interests. The investment preceded the election secured the investment. The G20 agreed on the Santiago Principles for Sovereign Wealth Transparency in 2008. 24 voluntary guidelines, voluntary. 15 years later, compliance remains inconsistent and unverifiable. The people who designed the system also designed the compliance framework, and they designed it to fail. The sovereign fund is supposed to protect future generations. In Libya, in Venezuela, in Equatorial Guinea, the fund was looted by the sovereign couple before the crisis made headlines. By the time the population understood, the capital had already left the jurisdiction. 1MDB is the defining sovereign wealth scandal of the 21st century. $4.5 billion stolen from Malaysia's state investment fund, funneled through sovereign wealth vehicles across 6 jurisdictions. Goldman Sachs raised the bonds. The world's finest institutions enabled the theft. New York real estate, Hollywood films, luxury hotels, all purchased with stolen Malaysian sovereign wealth. The Wolf of Wall Street was co-produced with money stolen from the Malaysian people. Art imitates life. Life funds art. Capital funds everything. The Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative has returned billions to victim nations. But for every billion recovered, 10 billion were successfully hidden. The law moves at the speed of evidence. The capital moves at the speed of a wire transfer. The sovereign wealth competition creates leverage opportunities for small nations. Accept Gulf capital, accept Chinese capital, accept Western capital. Play each against the other until the best terms emerge, or until the bidding war turns into something less comfortable. India plays every sovereign fund, and every sovereign fund knows it. But the relationship is not predatory from Delhi's perspective. It is leverage. The world's largest democracy accepting the world's most opaque capital, because at the intersection of secrecy and scale, infrastructure gets built. The human cost of sovereign wealth deployment is measured in displacement. Farmers evicted, communities moved, land reclassified. The legal documentation is correct. The human cost is invisible. The fund was looted by the sovereign couple before the crisis made headlines. Until the residents organize, until the journalists arrive, until the story becomes unavoidable. The opposition to sovereign wealth opacity is growing. Global Witness, Transparency International, ICIJ. Organizations that exist specifically because the system cannot police itself. The European Union passed the most comprehensive AML package in history in 2024. A new EU anti-money laundering authority with direct supervisory powers, beneficial ownership registers, mandatory disclosure. The sovereign wealth industry hired 400 lobbyists to shape the final text, and succeeded. When a jurisdiction faces blacklisting, the sovereign wealth couple's first call is to the attorney. The second call is to the political contact in the threatening jurisdiction. The structure is reformed on paper. The beneficial ownership is repatriated to a new vehicle in a different jurisdiction, which has not yet been reviewed. When banks enable sovereign wealth opacity, the fines arrive eventually. HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Société Générale. Each continued operating. Each was fined again. The fine is cheaper than compliance. The math is simple. Each continued operating. Each was fined again. The fine is cheaper than compliance. The math is simple. The most powerful weapon against sovereign wealth opacity is the insider. Compliance officers, accountants, IT administrators, people who see the structure from the inside and choose to speak. They face everything the sovereign couple's legal team can deploy, and some still speak. The competition between sovereign wealth powers is not cold, it is active. Gulf versus China, China versus US allies versus everyone, each acquiring the same assets, each in a different financial vehicle. The battleground is a spreadsheet, the casualty is sovereignty. Technology is now the primary battleground of sovereign wealth competition. Every major tech acquisition now faces national security review in multiple jurisdictions. Every major tech acquisition now faces national security review in multiple jurisdictions. The sovereign couple files in Delaware and hopes no one asks too many questions in Washington. The tension has been building for 3 decades. The fracture is visible now. Regulatory frameworks are catching up. Civil society is organized. Whistleblowers are speaking. And the sovereign couple's greatest asset, silence, is becoming its greatest vulnerability. Part 4 is where the silence ends, and the reckoning begins.
The reckoning doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives jurisdiction by jurisdiction, story by story, leak by leak. And when it arrives, it changes everything. Not just the law, but the landscape. This is part 4. The moment the world decides what sovereign wealth means for democracy. International law has never effectively governed sovereign wealth. The structures are too fragmented, the jurisdictions too cooperative with capital. But new precedents are being set, slowly, imperfectly, with enormous resistance. The ICJ does not move fast, but it moves permanently. The Pandora Papers named 35 current and former world leaders, more than 300 public officials across 91 countries, all using sovereign wealth structures to hold personal assets in secret. The papers were a mirror. Few governments enjoyed what they saw. The United Kingdom passed the Economic Crime Act in 2022 in response to Ukraine. Overseas entities owning UK property must now declare their beneficial owners. Within months, thousands of previously anonymous properties gained names that led to investigations in 6 countries. The EU's beneficial ownership directive was weakened by the European Court of Justice in 2022. Public access to corporate registers was restricted as a violation of privacy rights. The sovereign wealth industry contributed legal analysis to that case. The ruling protected privacy. It also protected opacity. The timing was not coincidental. The developing world pushes hardest for sovereign transparency reform. They are the most victimized by predatory sovereign capital, binding arbitration for disputes, civil society observer status. The UN process reflects this. Slow, contested, and absolutely essential. Technology is beginning to close the gaps that law cannot reach. AI-powered entity resolution, network analysis, satellite imagery of asset locations. For the first time, automated tools can map the corporate structure faster than it can be rebuilt. The sovereign couple's greatest asset was complexity. Complexity is now computable. The Panama Papers required 400 journalists from 80 countries working in secret for a year. The coordination model was unprecedented. The result was historic. But the industry adapted. The structures moved. New jurisdictions emerged. Each leak produces a more sophisticated response. And the next generation of leaks. Africa is building its own sovereign wealth governance framework, not waiting for Washington or Brussels to create the rules. The African Continental Free Trade Area creates a new capital allocation architecture, one in which African sovereign wealth can compete with external capital on African soil. The International Forum of Sovereign Wealth Funds claims 40 member funds, collectively managing over $8 trillion. They have agreed to best practice principles. Voluntary, non-binding. Progress has been made, and it has been made extremely slowly. Norway remains the global standard, but Norway is not the model that is spreading. The model spreading is the Gulf model, the Singapore model, the opacity model. Capital follows the path of least resistance and least disclosure. The world has chosen, and the world has chosen to remain secret. New models are emerging in nations that got the lesson early. Funds with independent governance, public auditing, civil society seats on the board. Chile's pension funds, Botswana's Pula Fund, Timor-Leste's Petroleum Fund. Small countries, transparent models, imperfect but improving. Reform happens when the cost of opacity exceeds the benefit. Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Angola. Nations where sovereign wealth was looted and the looting is now acknowledged. Acknowledgement is not accountability, but it is the necessary first step. The United States has returned over $4 billion in recovered sovereign wealth assets. Switzerland has returned billions more to nations that were victimized. The amounts recovered are a fraction of what was stolen, but the precedent that sovereignty can be reclaimed matters enormously. A new international framework for sovereign wealth governance is being negotiated. Mandatory beneficial ownership disclosure, multilateral exchange of information, binding arbitration for disputes, civil society observer status. The sovereign wealth industry's lobbying budget for this treaty is 3 times the negotiating budget. The next generation of sovereign wealth couples is adapting. ESG branding, impact investing, renewable energy portfolios. The language of transparency has been adopted. The structures have not been changed. Greenwashing is the newest form of sovereign influence management. Gulf sovereign wealth funds are investing massively in green energy, not out of climate conviction, out of post-oil strategic repositioning. The oil runs out eventually. The influence infrastructure must outlast the oil. The green energy economy will be built on sovereign wealth capital. The same structures, different fuel. Artificial intelligence is the next domain of sovereign wealth capture. Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, every major AI company has sovereign fund shareholders. The model that runs your search engine is partially owned by a couple whose names you don't know, in a jurisdiction you have never heard of, through a structure that will never appear in the headline. Space is the final frontier of sovereign wealth deployment. Orbital slots, satellite constellations, lunar resource rights. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 prohibits national sovereignty in space. It says nothing about sovereign wealth couple ownership. The smart city is the ultimate sovereign wealth project. Build the jurisdiction from scratch. Design the laws. Control the infrastructure. NEOM, Lusail, Eco-Atlantic. Not cities for citizens. Platforms for sovereign capital to operate without restriction. Climate crisis is creating new sovereign wealth leverage. The nations that are most vulnerable are the least powerful. The nations that caused the crisis have the most sovereign wealth. The climate deal and the investment deal are the same deal, negotiated simultaneously. The most profound consequence of sovereign wealth opacity is inequality. Capital that is hidden cannot be taxed. Capital that is not taxed cannot fund services. Services that are not funded cannot reach the people who need them. The sovereign couple's anonymity is the community's deficit. The OECD global minimum tax, 15% for multinational corporations, is the most significant tax reform in a generation. 136 countries signed. Sovereign wealth structures were explicitly excluded from the scope. The exclusion was negotiated. It was not an oversight. The minimum tax captures corporations. It does not touch sovereign capital by design. A new generation of sovereign wealth governance advocates is rising. Born after the 1MDB scandal, shaped by the Panama Papers, they understand the structures because they were educated in the institutions the structures funded. And some of them have decided that understanding the system is not enough. The single most effective instrument against sovereign wealth opacity is the insider witness. Every major leak, Panama, Pandora, FinCEN, began with one person who saw what was happening, who understood what it meant, and who decided that the risk was worth taking. The journalists who will break the next Pandora Papers are in school right now, learning corporate registry analysis, satellite image interpretation, cross-jurisdictional entity tracing, open-source financial intelligence. The skills of sovereign wealth investigation are becoming democratized, and that changes everything. Transparency does not destroy sovereign wealth. It legitimizes it. The Norwegian Fund is the most respected financial institution in the world because it is visible, because it is accountable, because it can be criticized. The structures that cannot be criticized can only be exposed. The world is negotiating a new financial architecture for the first time since 1944. The question is not whether sovereign wealth will have a seat at the table. It already owns most of the chairs. The question is whether the public will have one too. Personal liability for beneficial owners of sovereign wealth vehicles is the new frontier. Courts in the UK, the US, the EU, all exploring where accountability attaches. Not to the nominee director, not to the trustee, to the person who gave the instruction. The veil is still thick, but it is not impenetrable, not anymore. Sovereign wealth done right transforms nations. Botswana used its diamond revenues to build a middle class. Norway used its oil to fund universal services. The instrument is not the problem, the opacity is. And opacity is a choice. The sovereign wealth couple is, in the end, just two people, with access to structures that most people cannot conceive of. They are not villains in every story. Some build hospitals, some build universities. But they operate in a system designed for their benefit and against the public's knowledge. The city you live in is shaped by capital you cannot trace. The laws that govern you were influenced by interests you cannot name. The infrastructure you rely on may have been funded by a sovereign you have never elected. This is not theory. This is the world you already live in. Change is happening, slowly, imperfectly, against enormous resistance. But it is happening right now. The tools of exposure are improving faster than the tools of concealment. For the first time in decades, that balance may be shifting. The case for sovereign wealth transparency is not ideological. It is practical. Hidden capital distorts markets. Secret influence often corrupts democracy. Opacity enables abuse, and the world has paid enough for that bargain. $11 trillion of sovereign capital moves through the global system every day, through jurisdictions designed to forget, through structures designed to conceal. But the people who built the system are mortal, and the structures they built are not permanent. The question for our generation is simple. Will you know their names before they know yours?